We have another week, another farm, this time at Burn Brae Farms with Helen Ann Hudson. Thanks for having us, Helen Ann.
We're glad to have you.
So we are going to take a look at a pullet barn today, which is part of the raising an egg-laying hen. What is a pullet?
So pullets are basically immature laying hens. We buy them in at Burn Brae Farms at 1 day of age, and we raise them up in our pullet barns, or as we call them, brooder barns, until they're about 19 weeks of age when we move them to the laying farm.
Mm-hmm. And so in that process, what are some of the things involved in raising a pullet?
So pullets are brought in at a day of age, as I said. They've already had a couple of vaccinations. While they're in the pullet house, they are given a series of vaccinations to ensure they are very well immunized before they go into the laying barn. We also keep them on, we feed them rations that are that promote the best growth that they can achieve to get good body frame and good robustness when they go into the barn. So those diets are corn and soy based. Corn for energy, soybean to maximize the protein content, ensure they get the proper amino acids to grow. And then we change the calcium and the protein levels as they grow to give them more calcium later in the pullet housing cycle, so that they can use that calcium to store in their bones for egg production.
So now, in this pullet barn, this is a little bit unique, or at least, somewhat new within the last few years, is this free-run housing system, where the birds are roaming around the barn, really. What are some of the differences between a free-run housing system and what we saw already earlier this year in that enriched housing system?
So free run, we kind of refer to that as back to the future, because it's kind of like the way we raised pullets 50 years ago, except the housing system has changed a bit. But basically the birds roam around free after they reach about 7 weeks of age, and they are free to move between different levels in the house where they can perch or feed or get water on any of the different levels. And they can fly and they can walk up ramps between the levels. And so it's a little different from the caged environment where the birds live in a cage. All their friends are the same, and they have water and feed in the caged housing environment, and they are a little bit easier to manage because they're in smaller groups. Chickens are, by design, an animal that lives in a small social group, so keeping them in small social groups reduces aggression and controls their behaviors helps us to control their behaviors a little better.
So as more people look to that free-run eggs, there's trade-offs from the production side.
Yes, when you raise birds in the aviaries or free-run systems, they have more exposure to possible disease because they're down on the floor pecking around in their manure. There's more aggression possibilities. There's usually higher mortalities in those types of systems. When they're in the egg-laying aviary, there's more potential for dirty eggs because they may start laying their eggs on the floor. There's also the issue of sustainability because you're looking at a much higher carbon footprint in the aviary barns. You have half the number of birds in a barn the same size that you would have cage birds in. It takes more resources to look after them. Worker health and well-being is a bit compromised in an aviary because it's a bit harder work in those barns. They're dustier. The environment is not as good for both the workers and the birds. It's harder to control because you don't have as many birds in the barn and you can't ventilate the same way.
So being that the birds roam around doesn't necessarily make it better for the bird.
That's true. There are trade-offs, like we just said, and one of them, and even though they can move around, which is the biggest sustainability / welfare perk for the birds, there are many other downsides to that system.
So now there's thousands of birds in the barn. You can't individually possibly get them to, here's the feed, here's the water. How do you train a bird?
So it's important for these birds to be raised where the feed and water is in the beginning, and then once they reach a certain stage, we let them out to have access to the full barn, full use of all the equipment. But the way we train them to perch at night, for instance, is they shut off the lights in stages, and they keep the lights on, lastly, over top of the equipment. And the birds instinctively want to perch and sleep somewhere where they consider it safe, as a jungle fowl would sleep in a tree, up off the ground, away from predators. So instinctively, they want to perch, but we just have to give them a little bit of help.
So now, in terms of Burn Brae Farms, one of the things that I think most Canadians will have heard of Burn Brae Farms from the grocery store and all over the place, because you are one of the largest egg producers in the country. And I think people have this idea that maybe big farms, big corporate farms aren't necessarily the way that the food system should be going. But just because you guys are big, you're actually, and we're looking at the board behind you here, is the family history, because this is actually a family farm.
Yes, we are a farm, we are an agribusiness, but we are a very big agribusiness run by a family. We are fourth generation. The fourth generation Hudsons are actually running Burn Brae Farms, and some of the fifth generation are now involved. And we just had a sixth generation born last year, so we're pretty excited.
It'll keep going. But when you talk about family, like here's on the board, here's your great-grandfather.
My great-grandfather.
He's the one that started Burn Brae Farms.
He bought the original homestead that's in the picture below him, and
which is where we're at right now. This is the same.
Where we are, and he named it Burn Brae. Burn is Scottish for a creek, and Brae is Scottish for a hill. So.
And then the family history just continues to where you are today, selling eggs across the country. Where can people find Burn Brae eggs?
You can find Burn Brae eggs in basically all the major supermarket chain stores. In smaller stores, we sell all across the country, and we sell we sell shell eggs, and we sell further processed products, both at a retail and an industrial food service level. Mm-hmm. And so we mentioned the hard-boiled eggs, hard-boiled peeled eggs, which you can buy in the deli section of the supermarkets, and that makes a great, convenient, nutritious snack. Yeah. Hard-boiled peeled eggs.
Very cool. From your family to everybody else's. So
that's right.
Thanks very much for the tour today, Helen Ann.
No problem.